DNA from a sexual assault kit that sat untested for decades has led to the arrest of a suspect in the cold case murder of a California woman who was raped, strangled, and beaten to death more than 40 years ago. Harold Warren Carpenter, 63, was taken into custody on Monday in Washington state and charged as a fugitive from justice as he awaits extradition back to California, where he has been charged with murder in the 1979 slaying of Patricia Carnahan, authorities announced. According to the El Dorado County District Attorney's Office, a woman was found beaten, strangled, and left for dead on September 28, 1979 at a campground in South Lake Tahoe. Investigators gathered evidence from the scene, including a sexual assault kit that provided police with a DNA sample. Authorities were not able to identify or arrest any suspects in the brutal slaying, but they were also unable to identify the victim. As a result, then unknown victim was buried in a nondescript potter's grave marked simply, "Unidentified Female." Carnahan was finally identified as the victim in 2015 after investigators with the El Dorado County Cold Case Unit reopened the investigation into her death. With the help of a forensic anthropologist from Cal State University, authorities exhumed Carnahan's remains and placed photographs of the jewelry she was wearing when she was attacked in the newspaper. Family members were able to identify a pendant Carnahan was wearing. Authorities then confirmed the victim's identity through DNA testing before releasing the remains to her family for a proper burial. The killer's identity continued to remain a mystery until a break in the case came from an entirely different state, investigators say. As part of an effort to eliminate the backlog of untested sexual assault kits, SAK, law enforcement authorities in Washington earlier this year tested an SAK collected as evidence in a 1994 rape investigation that had been deemed unprovable. The results from the DNA analysis were uploaded to the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, which is a series of national law enforcement DNA databases maintained by the FBI. The sample from the unprovable rape case came back as a match for the DNA evidence collected from Carnahan's SAK, identifying the suspect as Carpenter. Investigators from El Dorado County say they developed probable cause to charge Carpenter with murder and traveled to Spokane, Washington, where they assisted law enforcement in Carpenter's arrest. Cases like this illustrate the need to test every sexual assault kit and get their DNA profiles loaded into the federal database, Washington Attorney General Bob Ferguson said in a statement. Every untested kit could be a potential break in a cold case. Hard work and cross-state collaboration made this case successful. I'm grateful for the hard work from law enforcement to pursue justice in this case. Carpenter is currently being held without bond in Spokane as he awaits the extradition process, which has already begun. He is not being charged in the 1994 rape case because the statute of limitations has already told and the victim is deceased. Over 4 decades ago, the body of Richard Wheeler was found in a wooden property by a construction worker in Nakamixon Township. Prosecutors failed to identify Wheeler's killer for 43 years until April of 2023. Investigators with the Bucks County District Attorney's Office and the Pennsylvania State Police have identified the man who shot and killed 34-year-old Richard Wesley Wheeler in September 1980 in Nakamixon Township. Peter Eric Marskner, who changed his name after fleeing from authorities, shot Wheeler 4 times and hid his body on the wooded property off Center Hill Road, approximately a mile south of the intersection with Kintner Hill Road, in Nakamixon Township. Wheeler's body was located on September 18, 1980. This investigation, pieced together by Bucks County Detective David Hanks and Pennsylvania State Police Trooper Christopher Cleveland, determined Marskner killed Wheeler under orders from another man, Leslie Schmidt, because Schmidt felt Wheeler mishandled a large sum of money Schmidt had entrusted Wheeler to manage. Both Marskner and Schmidt have since passed away, Marskner in 2006 and Schmidt in 2022. The Bucks County District Attorney's Office considers this case solved due to the deaths of all the participants in the murder. Additionally, this office has consulted with the victim's family, and they are grateful that this crime is now solved. This incredible piece of investigative work built a timeline of events that ultimately solved this cold case. The final piece to this mystery was accomplished earlier this year when investigators were able to track down the shooter. The investigation found that the 3 men, Wheeler, Marskner and Schmidt, met while incarcerated in Danbury Federal Prison in Danbury, Connecticut. Marskner, a German national known as the Captain, had a history of stealing yachts, boating equipment and money from harbors in the Caribbean islands. Marschner was sent to prison in May 1974 for 2 years for stealing a 41-foot sailboat in Martinique. After he was released from prison, he was supposed to be deported to Germany, but he found his way back to the Caribbean islands by working as a crewman on a private yacht. The yacht was in St. Lucia in February 1977 when the owners went ashore for the night. The next morning, Marschner, all the money on board, $10,000 worth of boating equipment and a motorized dinghy were missing. A month later, Marschner stole a 43-foot sailboat from a harbor in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands. After an extensive manhunt, Marschner was arrested by French officials in May 1977. Marschner eventually pleaded guilty to grand larceny and interstate transport of stolen goods, landing him in Danbury Federal Prison, where he met Wheeler, a marijuana dealer who escaped to California prison, and Schmidt, a Bucks County methamphetamine dealer. While incarcerated, the three men conspired to set up a methamphetamine lab in Upper Bucks County once they were released from prison. Wheeler was the first to be released in November 1979. Later that year, Schmidt was released on a 30-day furlough. During his time out of prison, Schmidt introduced Wheeler to a friend, who leased Wheeler the property in Nakamixon Township. Schmidt also provided Wheeler $250,000 that was to be used to care for Schmidt's family while Schmidt finished serving the remainder of his sentence. In July 1980, Marschner was released from prison and was taken by U.S. immigration officials to JFK Airport in New York City to be sent back to Germany. During the confusion caused when his deportation flight was canceled due to mechanical issues on the plane, Marschner managed to escape and walked away from the airport. Wheeler had begun work for the methamphetamine lab on the Nakamixon Township property and was living on a camper on the property. Schmidt was still in prison but was financing the drug operation. Marschner reconnected with Wheeler in Bucks County and became Wheeler's personal bodyguard and driver. At some point, Schmidt and Wheeler had a falling out over their business venture. Schmidt believed Wheeler was mishandling the $250,000 Schmidt had given Wheeler, and he was using the funds for himself and not for Schmidt's family. Because of that belief, Schmidt ordered Marschner to kill Wheeler, the investigation concluded. Wheeler was shot 4 times, sometime between September 8 and September 18, 1980. After the killing, Marschner, who was 42 at the time, fled in Wheeler's pickup truck to New Jersey. In 1983, investigators spoke to witnesses, concluding that Schmidt hired a German guy to pull the trigger. Further, the gunman was someone Schmidt had met in Danbury Federal Prison, investigators learned. Throughout the case, investigators have tried to locate Marschner, who disappeared after killing Wheeler. Earlier this year, investigators examined Marschner's criminal history and discovered he was arrested in 1982 on drug conspiracy charges in New York and identified himself as Charles McLaren. The fingerprints from McLaren's arrest in 1982 matched those of Marschner's arrest in 1977. The investigation found that Marschner had been living as Charles McLaren, with a new name, date of birth and social security number. After being released on the drug conspiracy case, he moved to New Jersey, got married, had children, and ran a successful limousine service in New York City before his death in 2006. Sonia Houston wasn't sure what had killed her mother 4 years ago. If anything was to blame, it was probably her drinking, Houston said she believed, until May 31st. That's when authorities in Austin, Texas, revealed that convicted murderer Raul Meza Jr., 62, had confessed to multiple killings, including the 2019 death of Houston's 66-year-old mother, Gloria Lofton. Had he not confessed, she would have just been another unknown, Houston said, putting the blame on authorities for not properly investigating her mother's death. Meza, who had been the subject of a manhunt in the May 20th killing of his 80-year-old roommate, made his admission last month after he called a city hotline and was transferred to a homicide detective, police said. "My name is Raul Meza, and I think you're looking for me," Meza said, according to an affidavit in support of Meza's arrest filed Wednesday in Travis County District Court. Meza, who served 11 years in prison for the 1982 murder and sexual assault of an 8-year-old girl, has since been accused of murder in both deaths. Austin police say they are looking into links between Meza and as many as 10 unsolved killings dating back to the 1990s. The revelation has left Houston furious with authorities over their handling of the investigation, an inquiry that she said for years offered few answers and appeared to miss potentially key evidence, including a used condom that Houston said she found in her mother's kitchen. According to the affidavit, authorities accused him in the sexual assault and strangulation of Lofton, an allegation partly supported by a swab taken from Lofton at the time of her death that provided a DNA match to Meza in 2020. Yet in the months after her body was found, the Travis County medical examiner listed her cause and manner of death as undetermined, according to the affidavit. And Houston said she never heard from authorities again until after Meza told the detective on May 24 that he was responsible for the killing of a lady on Sarah Drive. It would have been different if she was white and on the other side of Austin, Houston's older sister, Christina Fultz, said in an interview. It would have been solved in a week. Gloria Lofton was of Mexican descent and lived on Austin's east side. An Austin Police Department spokesperson said in an email that Chief Joseph Chacon was recently made aware of the case's details and had launched an administrative review of potential investigative lapses. The spokesperson declined to comment further. A spokesman for Travis County said he could not comment on how the medical examiner's office reached its conclusion, citing an active investigation. According to the affidavit, one day after Meza's call, the medical examiner updated Lofton's manner and cause of death to homicide by strangulation. A lawyer for Meza, who was being held at the Travis County Correctional Complex on a charge of capital murder, did not respond to a request for comment. A motive for Lofton's killing remains unclear. According to the affidavit, Meza told authorities that he had been promised 25% of the money Lofton's nephew would inherit. But Houston said her mother didn't have any nephews. Houston said she has no idea if her mother knew Meza. Houston described her relationship with Lofton as complicated. Her mother was whip-smart, Houston said, and introduced her to books, music and film. Lofton also worked hard doing administrative work, accounting and other clerical jobs to send her daughter to a private Catholic school, Houston said. But Lofton was troubled, Houston said. She'd been mentally and physically abused by men and never addressed what Houston described as the demons that seemed to fester with age, her daughter said. Houston said her father, who served in the Army and Air Force, was very respectful and only stayed with Lofton until their daughter was 4. Lofton quit working in her late 40s, spent much of her time drinking and moved in with her father, Houston said. She last saw her mother on May 8, 2019, when Lofton dispatched her to buy a pack of cigarettes and beer, she said. Houston said she reluctantly agreed after pressuring her mother to eat. The next day, as Houston returned home, she arrived to police officers who told her of her mother's death, she said. Authorities had found her in her bedroom, naked from the waist down with the 2 shirts she was wearing pulled above her head, according to the affidavit. They offered few details about what had happened, and after roughly 24 hours, authorities had returned her mother's house keys and said she could return to the home, she said. Houston's older sister, Fultz, went with her to the house. Lofton had given her older daughter up for adoption as a newborn, but the sisters became close in the years before Lofton's death. We sat outside watching the crime scene people leave with bags and they didn't say anything to us, Fultz recalled. They didn't warn us. They didn't say, hey, by the way. It was so insensitive, Fultz said. It was horrifying. Inside, the sisters found a home that looked like it had been ransacked, Houston said. There was a bloody pillow and blood spatter down the hallway, Houston said. In the kitchen, Fultz said they found lube, a condom and a wrapper inside what appeared to be a detective's latex glove. Houston ran outside and burst into tears, Fultz said, adding, it was the worst wail of a cry. All I could do was hug her. The police department spokesperson did not respond to a request for comment. Despite the scene, Houston came to believe her mother's drinking was likely to blame for her death. Did she get drunk and hit her head? Houston said. She's home alone. Anyone who's been drunk, you know accidents do happen. Did she try to crawl her way into bed? Houston was baffled by the autopsy's inconclusive findings, but after Lofton's death she remained focused on laying her mother to rest and sorting out her affairs, not seeking legal advice, as some suggested. Now, she wants justice for her mother. They wanted us to solely blame the perpetrator, the criminal, and yes, I can say all day long how I feel about Raul, she said. Karma is a very serious lady. She added, beyond him, am I supposed to say, they handled this to the best of their abilities? From the looks of it, they didn't. More than a half-century after Maryland high school student Pamela Conyers was found strangled to death following her disappearance from a local shopping mall, law enforcement officials announced Friday that they finally solved the case. But the suspect, Forrest Clyde Williams III, whom detectives identified using DNA technology and genetics research, died in 2018 of natural causes. Officials haven't linked him to other unsolved crimes, leaving many unanswered questions for residents of the close-knit suburban community outside Baltimore. The night of Conyers' disappearance, the 16-year-old attended a high school pep rally and then drove to the mall. Her parents reported her missing when she never returned from running errands. 4 days later, authorities discovered her body in a wooded area, not far from the family car she had been driving. There was no evidence to suggest Conyers knew her accused killer, and Arundel County police officials said at a news conference Friday. They also said they haven't ruled out the possibility that another suspect was involved, meaning the case is not yet considered closed. Federal and local officials praised detectives for pursuing a decades-long search for justice in the case. "We are pleased to deliver a measure of justice for Pamela Conyers and her loved ones," said FBI agent Tom Sobocinski. "Cases may grow cold, investigators may change, but this proves that for law enforcement, victims are never forgotten." Detectives used DNA analysis and a process called investigative genetic genealogy, both of which didn't exist when Conyers was killed in 1970, Sobocinski said. When investigators collected evidence from the 1970 crime scene, they had no idea how it might later be used. But cold case detectives recently developed a DNA profile that they compared to information available in publicly accessible genealogical databases, officials said. That allowed them to identify potential relatives of the suspect, create a family tree, and ultimately pinpoint Williams. He declined to specify which relatives led them to Williams or describe the process in detail. But Sobocinski said the case demonstrates how evolving technology allows law enforcement to solve cold cases, a process that has given hope where previously there may have been none. Such genealogic investigations have revolutionized cold case investigations across the country in recent years, though privacy advocates have expressed concern about the implications of law enforcement accessing public genealogy databases. And Arundel County officials provided little information about Williams, saying only that he had a sparse criminal history and spent most of his life in Virginia. He was 21 when Conyers was killed. Officials said his family moved to Maryland when Williams was a teenager and he attended an Arundel County high school. He moved back to Virginia sometime later. Police presented an old mugshot of Williams from the early 1970s, saying he was arrested locally on minor counts, including drunk and disorderly conduct. Online court records didn't include a reference to that arrest, though they show he received a citation for fishing without a license in 1990. Calls to phone numbers associated with his relatives weren't immediately returned Friday. Williams was survived by 2 children and many other relatives, according to his obituary. If he were still alive, he would have been charged with the murder of Pamela Conyers, and Arundel County Police Chief Amal Awad said during the Friday news conference. Officials said the Conyers family had requested privacy. Michael Golden, a high school classmate of Conyers, said the announcement brought some sense of closure but also raised more questions. Golden attended the news conference with his high school yearbook in hand, opening it to a photo of Conyers. "It's still frustrating because I don't know anything about this guy," he said of the suspect. "It's something all of our classmates have been grappling with for all these years." Golden, who befriended Conyers during band practice, said he vividly remembers when she went missing. He recalled an image of her empty desk in trigonometry class the Monday morning after her disappearance. "I still mourn her death," he said. "I got to grow old, and she didn't. She's forever 16. David Wells, another longtime community member whose wife went to school with Conyers, said he was serving in the Air Force when the case was unfolding. He recalled being stationed in Hawaii and receiving letters from family members about the tragedy back home. Wells said he was surprised to learn detectives didn't believe her killing was linked to other cold case homicides involving young women victims around the same time. While the investigation remains open, officials said detectives don't believe the Conyers case is connected to the killing of Catherine Cessnick, a Baltimore nun who went missing from a local shopping center and later was found dead from blunt force trauma. That case was featured in a 2017 Netflix documentary, The Keepers. Ashley Parlier was 21 years old when she was last seen, and her family believes she was 5 to 7 months pregnant. Her sister Nicole says Ashley was not like most 21-year-olds. Ashley had the mental capacity of a 12 to 14-year-old, was very naive, and had very little social skills. She lived with her parents in the 400 block of North Bedford Road in Battle Creek. It was also the location where Ashley was last seen. A Pennsylvania man has been charged with first-degree murder in the June 2005 disappearance of Ashley Marie Parlier. Harold David Holman, 44, was arraigned in Calhoun County District Court Wednesday afternoon in connection with the disappearance of Parlier, 21, of Battle Creek. Holman, who once lived in Battle Creek, became a suspect in the disappearance of Parlier during an investigation in the deaths of 2 women in eastern Pennsylvania. Holman pleaded guilty to both Pennsylvania murders in 2021 and is currently serving life sentences without the possibility of parole in those cases. As part of a plea deal with Luzerne County District Attorney's Office, Holman has agreed to cooperate with Calhoun County detectives and is expected to plead guilty to first-degree murder in the death of Parlier in exchange for the state of Pennsylvania not seeking the death penalty. He also served jail time in reference to a 1999 homicide in Ramstein, Germany. "We know it means a lot to the family of Ashley Parlier and the friends of Ashley," Calhoun County Prosecutor David Gilbert said of Wednesday's arraignment. "Some people had been suspects for a really long time, and now they have that weight taken off their shoulders." Holman will remain lodged at the Calhoun County Jail throughout the disposition of his case. Attorney Magistrate Amber Straub denied bond in the case. Parlier, who had the mental capabilities of a 14-year-old, was pregnant and had been working at Taco Bell on Capitol Avenue Northeast to save money for a car, her family said after her disappearance. Her father said she left the house June 12, 2005, with $700 in cash and was never seen again. At the time, police questioned friends and her boyfriend, but never found any evidence connecting Holman to her disappearance. Battle Creek detectives, who had the case for years, presumed the woman was dead, although several searches failed to locate her remains. The case was transferred to the Sheriff Department 2 years ago after detectives concluded that Parlier likely died outside the city of Battle Creek. Calhoun County Sheriff's Department Detective John Pignataro said Holman, who was described as transient and without a permanent address in Pennsylvania, lived in Battle Creek's Lakeview neighborhood and the Fairfax Addition in Emmett Township between 2005 and 2009. He worked at Meyer on Beckley Road, 2 Stanley, and the former Notka Bowl on Columbia Avenue. Detectives were contacted by Pennsylvania law enforcement in 2021 after Holman provided them with details regarding Parlier's disappearance and the possible location of her body in the north section of Newton Township. Holman had told detectives he met Parlier and her parents at the bowling alley, according to court papers, and that he talked with Parlier. Then she went to his home after calling and telling him her parents wanted her to take a pregnancy test. Holman also said that he was the father of Parlier's child. Parlier was killed in woods south of Battle Creek in Newton Township, Holman told detectives. He said he argued with Parlier and killed her by hitting her several times with a piece of wood on the evening of June 13, 2005. Holman said he returned to the scene several weeks or months later and only found bones, according to court papers. Officers have searched for her body and brought Holman to the area in late June 2021, but he was unable to direct detectives to the place he said he killed Parlier. Detectives have said they will continue their search for information about the location of her remains. "We have every intention of bringing Ashley Parlier home if we have the opportunity to," Calhoun County Sheriff's Department Detective Dave Huminga said Wednesday. Holman is currently serving life sentences for 2 additional murders. One occurred on approximately June 13, 2018, in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, and the second occurred on December 4, 2020, in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. While detectives expect Holman to abide by the terms of the plea agreement, Gilbert acknowledged it's all in the defendant's hands at this point, and he could back out of the deal. "It's a little more difficult without a body, but in this case I believe we have sufficient evidence to take this case to trial and get a conviction," Gilbert said. Detectives acknowledged the investigation could not have gotten to this point without the assistance of the Battle Creek Police Department, Michigan State Police, FBI, Pennsylvania State Police and Luzerne County District Attorney's Office, among other agencies. "We really took a real strong sense of ownership on this case, a great sense of teamwork, and we really tried to stay as much in contact with the family as possible," Pignataro said. "It's just been a very long road. We're really excited and very proud that we got to this point. Whenever you're talking about a family that's lost somebody who's missing, you don't know what's happened to them. You don't know if they're alive or dead, Gilbert added. There's more closure when we have the body, but there's a form of closure knowing what happened. Up until this point, no one knew what happened. That's very important to the family. Holman is scheduled to appear for a pre-exam conference in Calhoun County District Court December 22nd. A preliminary examination is scheduled for December 29th. In April 2023, a judge sentenced Harold Holman to 37.5 to 60 years in prison for Parlier's murder. Ashley's sister, Nicole Campen, said what Holman did stole 18 years of her life and destroyed her family. I was psychologically tormented when I lost my sister and have been in counseling for over a decade. I continue to search for her and talk to the detectives and media right up until you murdered her, named FBI agents, Campen said in her impact statement. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe and like the video, and click the bell icon to stay tuned.